amanastvānna me duḥkharāgadveṣabhayādayaḥ aprāṇo hyamanāḥ śubhra ityādiśrutiśāsanāt.
Because I am not this mind, thus not for me is sorrow, attachment, malice, fear, and so on. The self is without prana and even without mind. It is pure, thus declare the Shrutis. We now deal with the second aspect of our upadhis, the mind. This step is manana on the mind. It is more subtle reflection than that described in the previous verse. For the previous verse, refer to the talk on the verse 32, which is given earlier. It is much more difficult to negate the mind than to negate the body. The previous verse was on the first upadhi, body. The abstract is always more elusive than the concrete. Why is this negation being done, saying that I am not this mind? Is it because the Guru said so? No. It is because that is the firm conviction that is arising in our mind of the limitations incumbent upon these upadhis. Of course, needless to say that this conviction comes from the teachings of Guru on continuous Shravana Manana on Guru's teachings on about this second upadhi, the mind. Then, upon Mananam, it is from our intellectual conviction that we make the resolve to rise ourselves above these limitations, and not because anyone has told us to do so. What does it mean? It does not undermine the instructions or the teachings of the Guru. But what it says is that if the sadhaka, disciple fired up with mumukshatva, does not absorb, does not take in whatever the Guru teaches him on the second upadhi, manana, mind, manas, and the limitations of the second upadhi, the Guru may teach the same thing to 4, 5, 10 disciples gathered there. But then, what we mean to say is that only when a disciple is thoroughly convinced, that is what intellectual conviction means, thoroughly convinced at the Mananam stage about whatever Guru teaches on the limitations of the mind, then only he progresses further to grasp the limitations of the mind and then proceeds, evolves in his sadhana. The other disciple sitting there without getting thoroughly convinced may not have the intellectual conviction to believe in the limitations of the mind. That is what this line says. The mind here has to be taken as the entire antakarana or the inner equipment, the mind, intellect and ego sense. All these together form the mental upadhis. The mind here means manas, chitta, ahankara. Buddhi, MBCA. Each one of them is associated with the full baggage of attachments, fears, likes and dislikes, emotions and feelings, and the joys and sorrows that are the effects of these thoughts. A verse from the Mundaka Upanishad says, Etasman jayate prāṇo manah sarvendriyāni ca kam vayur jyotirāpa prithvi vishvasya dharini. That means from it are born breath, mind and all organs of sense, either air, light, water and earth, which is the support of all. From it means what? From the self. Shankara in previous verses explained that the bodies are perishable and the self is always distinct from all the sense objects and the senses and is ever free from any modifications. Here in these verses we learn that the self or the real I am always free from any emotions of sorrow, etc. And it is only from the self that all organs, the 5 elements, are born. Self is without mind, ever pure. So says the Shruti. Shankara here is explaining the nature of self through this quote from Shruti, from Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad through this verse explains the self as transcendental, since it is formless and is all that ever exists. Atman is all that is internal, external and is birthless. Hence, self is without prana or mind, which are temporary and is ever pure. Self is without prana or mind, which are temporary, and the self is ever pure. It is from self only that the pranas as well as the mind, all senses and all elements that support every object of the world originate. This was given in the Satchitpur way back, several years before. Thus, self is ever free from all the emotions of fear, anger, etc. and from the mind and breath, as it is ever distinct from them. Sorrow, desire, etc. are only characteristics of the mind, and it is only through the mind that one hears, sees and perceives all duality. Desire, deliberation, doubt, faith, impatience, patience, shame, intelligence and fear are all but of the mind, says Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The self, which is ever distinct from the mind, thus can never be subject to any emotions. Prana or breath is also a modification of matter, and hence it can never belong to Atman. The bodies and different objects of the world, which are but matter, can hence never be the self. Thus, Shankara is explaining in this shloka through the Shruti quotations that self, which is the substratum of all the objects of the world, is ever distinct from them. Go back to the Ribhu Gita verse which said, the self of all without all. From the last couple of verses, from 31 onwards, Atma Bodha verses, they begin to use the first person I, the subject of the actions. This is because the negation process is a process that concerns only me in my relationship with all these upadhis. It is an individual sadhana to overcome the individuality. No one else need even to know about this sadhana. It is a personal practice done for self-purification, not for acquiring any accreditation from others. Only exception being Guru. He is the source who is teaching his disciples everything. So, whatever the disciples have been taught, whatever they have absorbed and whatever they are experiencing, it should go back to the source. They should revert back, share. Then and then only the Guru will know whether they are on the correct track in their Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. It is in the absolute selfless interest of the Guru that the disciples should continuously share their experience, sadhana experience, and their sadhana evolving with their master, only and only for their own upliftment. Swami Chinmaya compares the step of bringing the mind under scrutiny as one would view or analyze one's own dream. Once the dream is seen as a dream, it ceases to carry with it all the associated feelings and emotions it may have carried while it was still being dreamt. Upon awakening from one's dream, the child that died in the dream does not bring sorrow. Similarly, the seeker does not lament that he has to give up all the feelings that he once associated with his experiences. He now sees his mental encounters dispassionately as a witness. The death of all the good or bad emotions and thoughts is not a cause for mourning, any more than are the termination of the sorrows and joys of dream upon awakening. The logic of Vedanta is simple. We need not complicate it. The process is seen simply as this: I am not these emotions. I am free from sorrow or pain. I have no attachment, malice or fear. Unquote. For several births, man is bound by his emotions, his mind driven by his vasanas, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, etc. When in one birth he takes up Vedantic study and he is determined to take up sincere sadhana, he has to fight the inner sanskaras which he has carried on for several births, which is possible only by negating that he is not any of those things. And this neti is to be taken up as a relentless abhyasa. This practice, if carried out in simplicity, which means with purity, is sure to bring the results of peace of mind. When this verse says, I am not this mind, it is not to be confused thinking that we should not have our mind to attain self-realization and exist as self. This point has to be noted down very carefully by sadhakas. Here it is not said that one should completely get beyond the mind and the mind should die totally. Even a Jivan Mukta or a sannyasi working for the welfare of mankind has to have sattvic mind, and they have to use their mind. What is to be overcome is the contamination of the mind by our vasanas and our 5 kleshas, elaborately dealt in MBCA and Vasana sessions. Once the mind is saved from the contamination, then sattvic intellect is mind. Buddhi is equal to mind, and it is used without even being aware or being deliberate to use one's mind. In this verse, the emphasis again is on pure. Mind is there, but it is pure, not contaminated by chitta and ahankara and vasana. At the highest stage of nirvikalpa samadhi, even the buddhi is not there. He gave a message recently to a few that a Jivan Mukta is not even aware that he is pure awareness while in samadhi. And also while in samsara, he exists as pure awareness without a thought of existing as pure awareness. I am not the manas or mind. The manas constantly in the grip of sorrow, attachment, hatred, fear and all other duality. I am not such mind which is gripped with all these dualities. The mind here also includes buddhi, ahankara, chitta, all of which are subject to destruction and death. I am not the pancha prāṇa too, prāṇa, vyāna, etc., which form the pranamaya kosha and condition the body and the mind. Pranamaya kosha is also temporary and subject to destruction. This verse also is for nididhyasanam. First and foremost, we must start totally identifying I with Atman. Me, the Atman, eternal existence, all-pervading, universal consciousness, bliss and absolutely pure. This is what I am. Next is what I am not. I am not the gross body. I am not the emotional mind or ahankara or chitta or buddhi or the 5 sense organs or the 5 organs of actions, all of which are parts of the subtle body. I am not the Karana Sharira. This way I must negate the entire avidya, the anatman. I am the one which infuses action and consciousness into anatman, but I remain actionless. This way the meditation must proceed with absolute, doubtless and confidence, till self-knowledge becomes absolute. Not repeating, but in the first 4 lines of the Nirvana Shatakam, Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittaninaha, you all must be knowing that by now. The negation process is contained in the first 3 lines of the verse and is followed by the assertion process in the last line in strict adherence to the nididhyasanam process. The meaning of the verse is explained as under. I am not the emotional mind, the manas, which vacillates between the thoughts and remains indecisive. I am not the intellect, the buddhi either, which is involved in decision taking. I am not the ego, the ahankara, which is responsible for the I feeling. I am not the chittam, which indulges in deeper thinking and storage of all memories. I am not the ears which hear the sounds from external world, or the tongue which tastes, or the nose which smells, or the eyes which see. Though I may be having all these faculties, but I am none of them. I am not the earth or the sky or the air or the light, the great elements of the universe. I am the all-pervading universal consciousness and eternal bliss. Shiva. The essence of that Shiva, the essence of Shivarahasya, who introduced himself in the Shivarahasya to the rishis by saying that I am the ever-living, ever alone, nameless, unfathomable ocean of existence. When the Shiva is nameless and all alone, from the last introduction, unfathomable ocean of existence, the ocean also loses its relevance, because at that state, ocean is also not there. So you can simply say, I am that Shiva, the unfathomable existence. Hari Om Tat Sat.